Hey everybody, it's so great to see y'all back on my channel. Today I'm so thrilled to have a very special guest, Rachana, join us. Following our discussions with Supriya on our last episode around the shift in product management and AI, it only makes sense to now kind of go up the chain and think about the impact that the current shifts in AI and tech landscape has on product management leadership. So I invited Rachana, whose most recent role was head of product and general manager at Gusto. Welcome, Rachana, to this channel. Before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me here, Helinda. Absolutely thrilled to be talking to this audience. So just a quick intro to myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachna. I switched into product after completing a computer science degree and miserably failing at writing code that would compile. So I started doing product management. And my early gigs were mainly in B2C, but I eventually moved to platform, did my own startup, and then have been firmly in B2B products for the last couple of years. But something that I noticed in my last four roles, as I progressed through the PM levels, just climbing the ladder, my responsibilities evolved from PM to GM type work. And I want to clarify in today's discussion, firstly, what do I mean by GM type work? So we'll talk a bit about that. What are ways to transition from PM to GM, or what are skills that span that? But just to give you a flavor of what I mean. So, for example, at Meta, on our ads products, particularly as we were dealing with data products, we needed to be acutely aware of any go-to-market messaging, and our go-to-market strategy needed to be thought through just as even as we were incepting a product idea. So it wasn't just about product development and working with design and engineering to build a product. It was taking a very holistic end-to-end view and thinking like a GM. And so my hunch is this push to have product leaders stretch into more GM type thinking and take on some of that work, not just partner with those cross-functional leaders, will become more and more prevalent as Gen AI tools start augmenting and simplifying our work.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive straight into it. So, how is AI reshaping the role of product leaders at tech companies, and what might be the impact on product leadership roles?
Yeah, I think something that I'm finding a trend currently. And just for context, I was till very recently a head of product and a GM for an emerging business unit at Gusto, and I finished up there last month. And even as I'm looking for my future opportunities, something that I'm discovering is there seems to be a move towards consolidation. And the trend I'm seeing is with dev tools or platform type products, uh, leadership is questioning the need for having a CPO plus a CTO. And so there seems to be a consolidation into a CPTO type role. And similarly, in my own stomping ground, so in B2B SaaS, where you're selling to businesses, be it enterprise or SMB, um, because there is such an acute need to orchestrate between both your self-serve and customer service augmented workflows, companies are looking more and more to bring in PMs who have had responsibility, a P&L responsibility, and can operate more like a GM. And I think just to be comprehensive, perhaps in B2C, it's probably more a trend given there is such an emphasis on building customer-facing experiences to look at bringing product leaders who can lead design teams and have had experience leading design and UX function. So I think that's where I see some of this is in anticipation as well as due to the acceleration in Gen AI investments, that there is a consolidation of leadership roles depending on the type of industry you're in.
Makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like, especially with Gen AI, right, a lot of the ways that we would think about design or product has kind of been now the lines have been really blurred, right? Because now we can take basically what how we would design experiences and even are thinking about how we would vision our experiences into this using Gen AI to kind of bridge the two together and be able to easily kind of come up with prototypes that then provide sort of that higher level vision, right? And so it makes a lot of sense that because all of these tools are now accessible, that the roles now would be consolidated for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah, for sure. As a product leader, then I guess the next question is like, how do we prepare ourselves for this like new feature?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time, particularly for those of you that are at the cusp of moving into leadership roles or looking or recently joined in as leaders, where you're manager of managers, taking on or expanding scope. I think the best thing to do is to first take a skills inventory. So, what was your path to PM? What were the things you learned along the way? And how does that um, lend you towards um, this consolidation? Like what can you position yourself as? So, for instance, I had a technical background and I studied engineering, but the second thing, like the industries I've worked in. So the last few roles I've worked in B2B. And so if I try to go down the CPTO path, it's not that I can't do that role. It's more, is that leveraging the best skills that I've developed in the last few roles. And so I think that skills inventory helps you go in with confidence. The second, looking at what industries you've worked in. So, for example, if I worked in B2B lately, I would have picked up some of the GTM skills by virtue of selling into businesses. And then finally, um, if you're already in a certain space and you're trying to get into leadership roles, I'd say optimize for one change. Don't go after changing industry and title.
Mhm.
And so I think the best way to prepare yourself is to first know what your unique skills are, know what your trajectory says to your audience, i.e., hiring managers, recruiters, and then think about how you can optimize your chances by learning skills within your space.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. So basically, understand your strengths, and then take those strengths to then figure out what's your next step in sort of a like where you are, just so that you're changing only one thing at a time and not necessarily industry and your skills and kind of your title, right? Makes a lot
Correct.
of sense.
Yeah, which is where, like, for me, while earlier part of my career, I had done more technical roles because in the last 4 to 5 roles, I've done more marketing, understanding ops, understanding sales, transitioning into something that was a hybrid PM to GM role made the most sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. How should a PM leader start thinking about the transition from product leadership to a GM role if that's something that they would want to pursue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think firstly, it's a mindset shift. I think as product leaders, you're thinking about moving to a CPO role and you're thinking about working on products in the business. And the shift you need to make is you're no longer working in the business, you're working on the business.
Mhm.
So you're not just working on products, you're working on a business. And so you really need to build that muscle of not just thinking about the product portfolio you're managing, but understanding what comes after that. which is distribution. So
Mhm.
once the products are ready, how are they going to market?
Mhm.
How are they getting commercialized? How much of it is self-serve or product-led growth, which you probably have a good handle on, but understanding the other side of distribution, which is how much of it is managed by your marketing operations and sales teams, and what impact does that have on the overall company level or business level goals?
Mhm.
And so, really starting to think about that and demonstrating that in your product strategy
Mhm.
and the goals you set is really where you start showing your spiking into that GM role.
Yeah.
And every time you're thinking about, okay, product performance, I want to talk about what my teams are going to deliver, start tying it to how does this then inform or help business performance. So,
Mhm.
for example, if you're committing as a product leader to certain amount of conversion lift,
Mhm.
being able to also specify how will this impact profit margin or will it impact profit margin?
Mhm.
Or if you're delivering a certain amount of lift in onboarding,
Mhm.
splitting that out and saying how much of it is self-serve versus how much of it will you need customer success capacity for, and how does that translate into customer service headcount?
Mhm.
Starts really helping you build that muscle, but also starts showcasing you as someone who's ready to take that next step into GM type role.
Makes sense. So it sounds like, making sure that we are building skill sets around not just inbound product management, but also outbound product management, as well as thinking about how it ties to business operations, is sort of how we would go about making that shift in skill sets. All right,
Yeah, I love that inbound, outbound framing. Yes, absolutely.
for sure. What are the most common mistakes that PMs make when stepping into GM positions?
Yeah, great question. I'll speak from, I think, let me first talk about the two things that are common uh, tough things or hard things that you need to learn when you make that transition, and then talk about the mistakes. So I think the two things that are super hard, like as we all know, product is all about trade-off decisions, right? Prioritization and making tough trade-off calls. Suddenly your span of trade-off goes beyond just EPDD. You're no longer just making trade-offs as an edge product design and data group.
Mhm.
You're now thinking about trade-offs across sales, CS,
Mhm.
ops,
Mhm.
whoever your product might touch. Doesn't have to be groups that your product doesn't touch, like internal IT services or whatever, but you get my point.
Mhm.
And so that trade-off expansion becomes really tough as a GM, and building that muscle is really tough. The second is understanding timelines.
Mhm.
Like you, as you grow in your product career, you develop a sense for how long does it take to prototype design, how long does it take for Edge to build XYZ feature, and sort of with AI, all of that is compressing.
Mhm.
But you have a sense for generally how long a roadmap, and you're setting that, you're actively talking about it.
Mhm.
The thing you haven't built a muscle for and need to start doing is how long does it take to get marketing out,
Mhm.
depending on channel?
Yeah.
How long does the sales cycle take
Mhm.
from identifying leads to actually getting to some sort of commits? How long does partnership or BD conversations take?
Mhm.
Those are new timelines that you need to start learning.
Mhm.
And so that's those are the two things that are tough about transitioning from PM to GM.
Mhm.
And so the common pitfalls or mistakes one ends up making, or particularly I did, learning from experience, speaking from my own experiences, um, I I always ended up thinking like a head of product and always just focusing on, oh, I need to grow the product. And so let me think about what can I do in product for self-serve. and not thinking about, oh, I have a ops team and I could be throwing more humans at the problem to at
Mhm.
least get an initial read quickly,
Mhm.
or fixating too much on DMF goals,
Mhm.
uh, but not really leveraging my sales team to at least start getting a early read on what is the revenue potential for a given segment,
Mhm.
and just really wanting to set things as a test
Mhm.
in the product because that's what my bias is. And so that's the piece where really starting to think about trade-offs, but also thinking about how to leverage my entire group
Makes
is
sense.
yeah, because you're always just thinking about, oh, my trade-off is across the product.
Right.
You're forgetting that you need to do trade-offs across sales and without demotivating them, or CS without demotivating them. And so how can you think of it as, okay, I could make this trade-off on product, but I could actually use these teams
Mhm.
to get XYZ read.
Mhm.
Is that making sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It sounds like it's you now have a wider scope. It's not just looking at the product. You now need to look at it holistically with operations, with sales, and then it's not just trade-offs around the product, but it's also trade-offs across the entire ecosystem as well.
Exactly. And almost thinking it more as a orchestration challenge, because you can then play with the timelines, right? Because that was the thing where, again, I'd always assume, oh, once the product is ready, we can get it out in market and we can start getting our sales funnel. And it's then that understanding of timelines
Mm.
and lead times help me actually sequence things and orchestrate in a more smarter fashion,
Right.
and not just lean on one set of tricks.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
But yeah, the common mistakes are just like forgetting that you have a
Well,
lot more functions and people and timelines to play with.
right, right. Makes sense. Makes sense. What are some of the best ways to gain hands-on experience with financial and operational decision making? Just because I think we talked about how, product is kind of very core in terms of, product management skill sets, but there's kind of a gap with financial and operational skill sets as well. So how do we kind of think about getting that experience?
Yeah, I think my key message there is really just build the muscle of going beyond your EPDD cohort. So EPDD, for those that use different terms, in Gusto and a few other companies' languages, Eng product design and data.
Mm, mm,
And so as product leaders, we are really seasoned and experienced in involving our Eng product design and data counterparts in quarterly roadmap planning and half yearly and annual planning. But I'd say, particularly when doing annual planning, you need to start looping in your FP&A partners,
mm,
your marketing, sales, and BD leads.
mm. Makes sense. And, I think we're running out of time, so I wanted to kind of wrap up this episode by understanding what's next with Rachana and, maybe what are some recommended courses, programs, mentorship opportunities for PMs that are, potentially looking to move into GM roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I'm doing, because one thing I kept getting questions from not just my direct reports, but my past teammates and direct reports was, how can I think about making that transition? I see more and more PM roles needing P&L responsibility, particularly in B2B SaaS. So I've set up a intro profile, so feel free to set up time with me. And if you're a Helinda Ho fan and listening to this podcast, you can use the discount code HHFan. It's a new setup, so if you have problems, just reach out to me, DM me on LinkedIn. Happy to also provide some free advice as a starter. And there is another course I'd recommend. So one of my fellow women in product, Elena Luneva, has put up courses on Maven, lightning talks on how to build P&L statements, how to start developing GM type thinking. So highly encourage you to follow her and perhaps enroll into one of her courses.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rachana. I hope this was helpful for everyone that's watching and listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Thank
Bye,
you.
team.